Okay, here we go. You need to review. This Chapter 1 test is next time. Okay, so the first learning objective was explain what matter is. If you remember, we had a little tree that looked like this, where matter breaks down into mixtures and pure substances go to elements and compounds, and mixtures go to heterogeneous and homogeneous. You need to be able to take anything I give you, like Rocky Road ice cream, and tell me what it is. Or H2O, or C6H12, whatever. You need to be able to put it in any of these areas and be able to choose which area it would go into. Okay, let's take a look at pure substances. Remember, on pure substances, you can break it down to elements or compounds. Elements are up here on the top. They're something that can't be broken down. They're what's on the periodic table. Compounds are right here. Those are substances that have actually a chemical signature, like NaCl or H2O or sugar or something like that. And it just gives you some visuals here to look at. Okay, so here's a review about mixtures. Remember that you have two kinds of mixtures, homogeneous and heterogeneous. Homogeneous is uniform throughout, like brass, and heterogeneous is like granite. It's not uniform throughout. Okay, so this is where we also could talk about our iron, sand, and salt mixture is heterogeneous. Remember, homogeneous has to be the same throughout. Okay, so what is the difference between the terms physical and chemical as applied to properties of matter and changes in matter? So you got properties and changes that you need to worry about. Properties are things for physical that cannot be changed. Chemical are properties that can be changed, like how it reacts with something or what happens as something happens to something else. Changes are the actual changes, the physical changes that take place. For instance, a physical change can be going from a solid to a liquid. So you can be melting. That's a physical change. You can be boiling. That's a physical change. You can cut something. That's a physical change. Okay? Chemical changes or chemical properties have to do with how it reacts with and how it reacts with. What does it react with? So properties, it reacts with water. It doesn't react with oxygen. How does it change? Well, it can change in color. It can change in appearance. It can change in a lot of different things. Now, appearance you got to be careful of because appearance can be physical and chemical. So watch that. You're going to need to make sure that you can take whatever I give you, baking bread, or remember the PowerPoint that we had earlier where I chose where these things went. You need to make sure that you could choose where they go and tell me if it's a property or if it's a change. Now, we need to be able to recognize and use measurements of unit in everyday activities and recognize the units of the metric system and be able to convert from English to metric and to metric and all back and forth and in between. Within this, and I didn't put this up here, but it's also number 9, you need to be able to use the factor liable method to make sure that you have the right unit. Okay? And of course, express correct number of significant figures and things in a scientific notation. So if you've forgotten how to do this, you need to go back over and practice some problems because you're going to be converting back and forth and you need to show me how you're doing it. Okay, this is going to be really, really important. You must have one of these sets of equations for temperatures memorized for the test. This is something I will not give you on the test. So you either have this side or this side. It doesn't matter. I prefer this side. It's easier for me to remember. But whatever side you memorize, make sure you memorize it. You need to be able to solve for Fahrenheit, Celsius, and Kelvin. So you'll need at least to memorize 2 of those. Okay? Then you need to be able to manipulate the equation to solve for the others. For instance, on this top one right here on this side, I'm looking at this one right here, you need to be able to solve this equation for C, which, by the way, is this side. So, and you need to be able to solve this equation right here for C, which, by the way, is this side. So if you don't like to solve, then you have 4 equations you need to memorize, but personally I would only memorize 2. And like I said, I like the right side the best. I like this side the best, and that's the side I would memorize if it were me. Okay, significant figures are a large part of the things that you need to know. So here are some rules and some significant figures again, just to go over them and make sure that you know how to identify significant figures. I've broken down into really small parts here. I've also talked about when you're adding or subtracting or multiplying or dividing, the special rules in each place. So make sure that you go over these. Make sure you understand how to do significant figures and how to identify how many there are and how to identify how many you should have after an operation. Okay, here's some numbers. I would like you to give me the number of significant figures for. Go ahead and pause the video and then start it up again when you've got your answers. Okay, how'd you do? These are the answers. The 0 here is significant, so you need to make sure that on number 1 you didn't ignore that one. The zeros here are not significant in 2 because they just tell me how small. The zeros here are not significant in 3 because they tell me how big. However, this 0 right here is significant. These are significant here in this number because they tell me how well I measured, but these are not significant because they tell me how small. So hopefully you're getting the idea. Okay, here's some adding and subtracting, multiplying and dividing. Make sure you report the answer to the correct number of significant figures. Again, pause the video, and then when you've got your answers, come on back. Okay, so if you added, these are the calculator answers right here. So those are what you got on your calculator. And over here is what the right answer is. So hopefully you've taken your calculator answer and changed it to a correct answer. Let's look at this. On number 1, we go to the second one after the decimal. So this one, the answer should go to the second after the decimal. So that's why you look here, then look past the number, that one's going to round up. Same thing here. You've got the 10th place is your least common, or the place that they both last have in common. So you can only report to the 10th place. So you go to the 10th place, you look at the one past that, which is a 2, does not round up. Then this one, remember multiplying and dividing is a little bit different. You look for the smallest. The first one has 3, the second one has 2, so you can only report 2. Remember that you have to put a 0 to keep the place to be 260 instead of just 26. On number 4, you've got 5 on this one and 4 on this one, so you can have 4 in your answer. So as we go to 4, that ends up in the 10th place. We look one past it, and yes, we're going to round up. So hopefully you've done okay with your significant figure practice. If not, remember there's a ton of sites that you can go out and look at. Please do work on them, get practice so that you're ready when it comes to the test. Okay, now we also need to remember how to do scientific notation, how to express the numbers in scientific notation, and how to do calculations with numbers in scientific notation. So we'll do a couple review problems here. Okay, here's some problems for you to work through. On the first ones, 1 and 2, just put it into scientific notation, and as practice, tell me how many significant figures. On 3 and 4, do the operations, give me the answer in scientific notation with the correct number of significant figures. Go ahead and pause the video, go and practice, and then come back and see if you got it right. Okay, check your answers. In parentheses are the number of significant figures you should have had. So let's look at each one of these. The first one, you're going to move the decimal from here. Let's get the pencil. From here, 3, 6, 9, 12, 13, 14 places to get it right after the 3. So that's where the 14 comes from, and you always have one decimal or one number in front of the decimal. And there's only 2 real numbers, so 3 and 6 with a decimal between. On the second one, again, we want 1 in front of the decimal, so we're going to move it here to between the 8 and the 7, so 3, 6, 9, 10, 11. And since it's a very small number, we put a negative in front of it. We keep all of the numbers back here, all of these, because they are all whole numbers and significant. So there's 5 significant figures. Remember the little trick with multiplying and dividing. Multiplying, you add exponents to see about where you should be. So 13 minus 7 is 6, so we should be within one of each of them. And when you put this in your calculator, you will end up with 2.4 blah 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 blah. Actually, I believe it's 2.38 something. But you only have 4 significant figures here and 2 here, so you can only report 2. Okay, now we remember the trick when you're dividing. You subtract exponents, so a negative 34 minus 23 will give you 57, which is within one of what we got on the calculator, so we know we're doing the things right. Make sure when you do this, though, you make sure after you hit the divide sign that you put the bottom in parentheses, because if you don't, you're going to end up to the wrong power. And that's one thing that doing that little check ahead of time is going to save you. You have 3 significant figures because on the top you have 4, on the bottom you have 3, so you have 3 significant figures. That was a quick review. If you need more help, you need to go and check out those sites that we showed you earlier. Okay, the next thing that you need to be able to do for the test is factor labeling or dimensional analysis. You need to be able to use and keep track of your factor units to solve for problems. So let's do a couple just to help you with that. Okay, so given the speed of a car is 0.024 kilometers per second, what is the speed in miles per hour? Again, set up the dimensional analysis like I have here. It makes life so much easier. Then you're going to start always with what you're given. Go ahead and put the kilometers on top with a second underneath. Okay, from that point we need to look up some conversion factors down here. And then we can go and convert. We can either decide to convert the seconds first or the kilometers. It doesn't matter. I'm going to do the kilometers or kilometers first into miles. So because they're equal to each other, I can put 1 kilometer on the bottom and put the 0.62 miles on the top. Kilometers then cancel out. Then I go about setting up my next conversion, which is to get out of seconds. Well, the only thing that has seconds is this one, so I'm going to put it up next. Okay, you'll notice that because second is on the bottom and I want to get rid of it, I put the 60 second on the top and 1 minute on the bottom. That way I can cancel out second with second. I am now in minutes, and I want to be in hours, so I've got one more conversion to do, and that one will be this one. You'll notice for this one I put the 60 minutes on top, so it will cancel with the 1 minute on the bottom. Therefore in purple I have the units that I need, which is miles per hour. Now what I'm going to do is take and times through the top and then divide parentheses times through the bottom. Well, you notice the way I've set it up, they're all ones on the bottom, so I don't need to worry about the parentheses. Take a second and see if you get the answer. Okay, you should have ended up with 5.4 miles per hour. 2 significant figures to start, 2 to end with. So you should be able to do anything I give you with factor label. It could be speed of the car, it could be converting a cookie dough recipe, it could be anything, so make sure you're ready for that. Okay, so another one of the learning objectives from the front of this chapter is to do calculations involving percentage. Whether I give you percent, or I give you the part, or I give you the whole. Remember, the equation is just that. You take, to get your percent, you're going to take the part divided by the whole and times it by 100. So depending on what I give you, I could give you the percent and the part and ask you to find out what the whole was. You need to be able to manipulate this equation. You also need to be able to do calculations involving density. Remember, our density is equal to mass divided by volume. Remember, if you're in love, you're dense, so divide it and you got your M and your V. I can give you any two of these and you should be able to solve for it. So I could give you density and volume and ask you to solve for mass. I could give you mass and volume and ask you to solve for density. I could give you density and volume and ask you to solve for mass. Any of those you should be able to solve for. So be ready for that. I also want you to be able to compare densities, because remember we did the density column and we talked about some other things with density, so make sure you're aware of that. Now, I believe I've covered everything that is in those learning objectives, but if I haven't, you're still held accountable for them. This was meant to be just a quick review for you to go back and, oh yeah, I know how to do that, yeah, I know how to do that. So make sure that you know how to do it before you come to the test. We'll see you next time.